So anyway, so I will get to our first speaker. It's PhilipCross, and apparently it's the University of Sydney, not the University of New South Wales. I think that may have been part of my fault because I didn't grow up in Sydney, so I'm not sure which one's which. Anyway, so yes, PhilipCross. I might get him to introduce himself because I don't know a lot about him, but I do know he's got this wonderful case study about BYOD for the faculty and possibly the students, I expect, at the university. So I might just hand it over and get this show on the road. And cool. We'll get the presentation happening. Send a clicker to you too.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Can everybody hear me okay?
Yeah.
Bit of background first. Yes, I'm not from the University of New South Wales. In fact, this year will be the 39th year since I did anything at New South Wales. And that was a degree that I completed in 1975. I work for the University of Sydney. And for the vendors in the audience, I'm classified as an IT manager. There's a CIO, 5 directors, 12 IT managers. So I'm one of 12 people. I do not make decisions about buying software and buying paper. So if people want to leave now, they can do that. This presentation started off being quite interesting. I was talking to Sandra in a different context, and Sandra said to me, does the university have a BYOD policy? And I knew we did, so I said, yes, of course. And she said, could she have a copy of it? So I went looking for it to find it. Yes, we did have a BYOD policy. I'm going to talk about what that policy is today as part of my presentation, but it's not something that I can hand out as a piece of paper. And you'll see why that's come about as we go through the presentation. Just a quick run through the agenda. I really am trying to avoid a situation where it's death by 1,000 PowerPoint slides. There are 14 PowerPoint slides in there. If you want to ask questions as we go along, please do so. Just stop me and we'll talk about, we've got ample time to cover anything as we go, and then we'll have the inevitable questions and comments at the end. One comment on the agenda, given that this is being videoed, I'm very pleased that I made the change. One of my grandchildren suggested that WTH should be WTF. A bit about Sydney University. I worked at the university for 5.5 years, and I had no idea what a big business it was when I started there. And those numbers sort of speak for themselves. Anybody here who's been to Sydney University? Okay, a few people. No doubt during semester you would have walked around and said, gosh, this place is crowded. What I didn't realise is that there are 50,000 students at the University of Sydney. Most of them are on the that Camperdown Darlington campus, and in fact the numbers up there that we have on average 38,000 students on campus each day during semester. So 28 weeks a year, we've got 38,000 people wandering around there. We've also got 8,000 staff. It talks about 10 campuses, but obviously the Camperdown Darlington one is the big campus. Some of our other campuses are at Cumberland, we've got places at Narrabri. You can imagine how big that campus is. So when I talk about 10 campuses, it's to reflect the fact that it's a diverse organisation. If there are 5 people in a campus at Narrabri, we have to cater for them, just like they were next door. And that's the point of mentioning the number of campuses. As a business, 22,000 desktops are located on at the university. 30% of all of our devices are Apple devices, and that number has actually grown from about 22% to 30% in the last 5 years since I've been there. The number of places that are technology enabled for teaching and learning and for students to walk into and study, sit down at a computer, 780 of them. I couldn't believe the number. I asked for a map to show me where those places were across our campuses. Complex business mentioned up there, 15,000 help desk calls a month. Doesn't take long to work out, but that's a lot of help desk calls requiring a lot of support, and they're coming both from students and staff. Interesting statistic is that about 40% of those help desk calls are answered at the time the call is placed. We still haven't got to BYOD yet, we'll get there. It's a busy environment, 38,000 students, 80,000 devices are connected each day at the university during the semester. And it's not hard to work out how. I've got my iPad, I've got my mobile phone, I've got a desktop, I've got a laptop. Sure, I work in IT, but I don't think I'm that different from the average person nowadays who's got a device that's connected, probably a couple of mobile phones actually. We've also got an 85% occupancy rate on our technology-enabled rooms. So 780 rooms, 85% of the time they are occupied with people doing something. The small print, by the way, is deliberately small, so you can't read it. It says excluding Friday afternoon, because anyone who's been to university will know that Friday afternoon we all go home. I don't. Sydney University is a very old university, but as a business, it's growing. I was going to put up there the planned percentage of student increases, but it was something that's still a noble goal at the moment. What we can talk about, though, is the buildings. You might have read an article in the Herald over the weekend that talked about the $1.4 billion the university is spending on buildings. That doesn't include $800 million worth of building works that's happening right now, or has happened in the last 2 years or so. Where I work, it's called the Services Building in Darlington. We've actually got building works going on either side of where I work. So you find people shuffle from one side of the building to the other to get away from the noise during the day. It's an extremely busy place in terms of extending the size of the campus. Is it a perfect place for BYOD? The answer to that is not quite. And the reasons are that we don't have universal wireless coverage. We're very, very close, but there are places that I can go in the university where there is no wireless coverage. And perhaps more importantly, we've got older buildings and remote campuses that are difficult to incorporate. We'll talk more about the buildings in a moment, but can you imagine that beautiful quadrangle building that is featured in the publicity, seeing wireless cable, a wireless adapter going in there, the impact that has on people. So we've got to find smart ways of doing that to hide them. We do have wireless through the product. The most interesting number is, from your point of view in this discussion today, is 2 BYOD specific rooms and 40 by the end of 2014. How can I get up in front of you and dare to talk about BYOD in my institution when we have 2 rooms? That's one of them. I deliberately took that photograph because it looks like just any other room that when you went to university. There's 2 subtle differences. It's absolutely chock-a-block with wireless. And the other thing is, this have wheels on, so that the lecturer can actually rearrange the room any way they want. They can be set up with pods in it down the wall, it can be set up with desks around the wall, it can be set up as classroom like this one. They can do what they like. We've only got 2 of these rooms because BYOD in the mind of a lecturer is students walking in with their own devices and then imparting knowledge in a forum, and they've got to get used to the idea that these rooms exist. So we've started with 2 and we're experimenting with them. BYOD is not being driven by teaching a class, but just to show you, not really different. Okay, what do I mean by BYOD? I've actually modified somebody else's definition here and not given them credit. I've substituted the word university in for where they had company. Staff and students have the ability to bring their own technical devices, like smartphones, like tablets and laptops, and use the university's wireless network instead of a university-provided device. I've got the word wireless up there. We're going to talk in a moment about the distinction between wired and wireless in a BYOD context. But when I talk about BYOD, that's what I mean. Anybody like to comment on that?
Just a totally practical question. It's to be able to use the wireless network. What about electricity? First thing I want to do is...
Sure.
And the tables moved.
We've got student facilities, and we're going to talk more about the student facilities. I must admit I haven't included the electricity in my list, but there are rooms now, all the labs that we build have actually got panel points around the side of the room. So a student can walk over to a high bench, put their computer on it, recharge in that room. When we build a lecture room, we have electricity coming up onto the desk so that they can plug in there. So not designed for BYOD, designed to get bodies off floors. Because what we found was that you'd walk into the Faculty of Education building and there'd be people sitting in the corridor with their legs across the corridor, all charging their devices. So it was driven not by a BYOD policy, but by a practical get that person off the floor, out of the corridor. And we're doing that all over the place. As an example, we've just spent $6 million putting in a student learning centre and refurbishing 6 computer labs. It doesn't sound like much money, much value, $6 million to do that, but that's because of the infrastructure that had to go in, like the electricity, like all the networking. Okay. The only other thing I want to point out on there is that I'm talking about staff and students, because really at a university, BYOD is driven by the students. And I'll show you more why it is in a moment. Oh, just one other thing before I go. I've looked into some BYOD case studies, particularly in the higher education industry. The one statistic that blew me away was that in 2013, a Cisco partner did a study of BYOD practices and found that the education industry in the US had the highest percentage of people using BYOD for work. That percentage in 2013 was 95.25% for higher education institutions in the US. Staggering figure. And I suppose what that does is show that universities set up the infrastructure and people came along and used it. And that's what BYOD is doing for us. Okay, let's talk about our policy. I said to you that we did have a policy that was several pages long about BYOD. It had things like, thou shalt only use this device, thou shalt only use this software, thou shalt not connect the DNS server to the network, those sorts of things. Our policy now is we do not prevent current students or staff members from using their own devices to connect to the university's wireless network. And of course, we do some checking to make sure that you are a current staff member or a current student, and we'll look at the list for that. And there are some terms and conditions that go with that as well. Oh, by the way, having a published BYOD policy, one of my colleagues said that's sort of akin to having a policy on fax usage. How do you describe to people how to use a fax when it just doesn't matter anymore? I hope there are no fax vendors here. The terms and conditions of our policy. Connections only possible with a valid login. We've got 4 flavours of login, and if I talk about staff members and students, that covers most of them. Staff members, as a staff member at the university, my login expires in 2099 or something like that, or when I leave the university, then my login is expired. If I'm a student in the university, my login is allocated and it's expired the next semester after the last time I enrolled in a unit of study. So if I enrolled in a unit of study in semester and finished in semester 2, 2013, I can still use my login in semester 1 of 2014. So we do give you that extra semester, and then it's expired. That expiry date is built into our login allocation process. If you don't have a login, you can't use either the wired or the wireless network. I mentioned 4 types of login. There are 2 other types. One of them is a guest login, and so I can arrange for, if we might have a seminar that's on for a couple of days, I can arrange for people attending that seminar to have a guest login. And the other one is a login called eduroam. And eduroam is a university collaboration login. I happen to live across the road from the Australian Catholic University in North Sydney. I can use their network because I have an eduroam login from Sydney University. They don't even know that I'm there. We've got students' connections in the wired network is restricted, of course, because if we've got widespread wireless, people can use that wireless as much as they like with their login. But if they want to use the wired network, basically it's only research students that have got the ability to use the wired network. And I mean that for their own devices. If they come into one of our student labs, different story altogether, of course, they can just log into the student lab machine and use the wired network. And one of the things we're going to talk about a little bit later is that one of the ways that we have combated BYOD is to deliver so much in the way of day-to-day service that the use of your own device has got limited advantages. So we'll discuss that. We've also got a published terms of use. Of course, there is a document that says you cannot download porn, you cannot send a 100 gigabit file, those sorts of things. So we're saying there are rules of engagement to use the network, even if you're only using your own device. We have so little trouble with people misusing the network.
Have you got technical controls that you prevent to prevent people from doing those things?
What we do is, whether I'm a staff member or a student member, if I downloaded a very large amount of data, that would turn up on the exception report.
Okay.
And
you don't
so,
stop them. You actually
that's right. We don't stop. What we do is ask the question then. The same thing goes with things like pornographic sites. We've got the usual barriers, but there are always new ones coming along. And as you pick them up, you stop them being used, that's all.
Why do you make the distinction between wired and wireless?
Because our wired network is a little less BYOD friendly than our wireless network. Our wireless network, if you can log on and you've got a device, you can use it. No questions asked. You have to have the ability to log on from the device. The wired network, if you want to come along and plug your own laptop into a wired network in one of the student labs, it won't work. Because we've got in there checks to see whether it's a university device or not. And so there is.
So does that imply there's an extra level of firewall on the wired network, on the wireless network that you don't do?
It actually implies that the extra level of security is pushed out to the wired device. It applies around, across the board. One of the things that makes our system work very well is that in January 2011, the university's network was hacked. That caused all sorts of ructions, and we got in the best people we could. We spent buckets of money and said, make sure that we have a proper demilitarised zone and it works. I'm not saying we can't be hacked because that would be stupid. Everywhere can be hacked, but we have far less problem than we used to. Now I've got up there about exceptions being monitoring, and that fits in that category of if somebody, any individual, be they If the Vice Chancellor downloads very large volumes of data, we'll go and check and find out why. We do actually have people researching pornography, would you believe, and they have got special exemptions that are built into the system. They can look at anything they want, anytime they want, without exception, and that's based around their login. I'm very good friends with all of them. Can we take that out of there? Okay. This is a busy slide, and I thought about breaking it up into two, but I figured that it all should go onto one place. One of the things that we've tried to do with BYOD, and accidentally we've done with BYOD, is delivered so much in the way of good services that people must ask the question, well, why do I need to bring my own device? And so, WallaceX is for all students across the campus. They can, it's free. They can, most places on the campus, they can just log in and use it. We don't check to see whether they're using Facebook. We don't care. We've got the capacity to do it, and we just do it. There are instructions on how to connect most common devices. Now, somebody's going to ask me for a definition of a most common device. I don't know of a device that is commonly used. You know, iPhones, all the Android phones, the laptops, you can have a Linux device, you can have an Apple device, you can have a Windows device. All of them can be connected onto our wireless network, and we show you how to do it. All you need is the login, the UniKey and login. We've got 400 computer labs of various configurations. Now, I mentioned 780 technology-enabled rooms. Technology to me is one of these things on the roof, no computers in there. That's a technology-enabled room, just a bit of AV. The 400 labs are about computers on desks, so that if you walk in there, you can log onto the computer. We've done some reasonably clever things there. The university about 2 years ago introduced a virtual desktop environment for most of our labs. And so a student that goes in and logs on a desktop has got a library of 300 applications that they can pick and download to their desktop. The next time they log in on another computer anywhere in the university as part of our VDI, it brings up their desktop with their applications. And they can add and subtract as they go along. It sort of begs the question, if the university is being so good with the stuff you can use there, why would I want to use my own device? They will, and we'll get to that. It's not hard to grow a network of BYOD rooms when you have 2 at the moment, and we'll have 40 at the end of the year. Interestingly, the 40 that are going in are in a brand new building. Sydney Business School has got a brand new building, will be finished at the end of the year, and 38 of those rooms will be BYOD enabled. Highlighted in red, not BYOD, learning centres with connected devices and 300 apps that I've just mentioned. Clear policies I've already mentioned. If you ring our help desk and say, my iPhone won't connect to your network, we'll give you minimum help because we want you to connect. But if you then say, well, I can't download this app that's the Commonwealth Bank one, we won't help you. We'll tell you to go away. Whether you're a student or not, you'll get the same sort of feedback on that one. The help desk handles so many calls, they can't afford to spend time on people's personal devices. So maybe that's an anti-BYOD stance, but it's just, we just can't afford to handle that.
Do you define for your help desk, and do you say like what types of calls they're allowed to give that type of advice? Like if it clearly indicates that it's a wireless issue, then.
The reason I said I started off by saying it was a connectivity issue, almost the help desk will not say to you, oh, what sort of device? Do you own that device? They won't do that. So the help desk has actually got an instruction that says, when you get to the point where it's clearly not something you can help the person with, and it's their device, stop. So we're not going to do this anymore. So they're extremely helpful on our help desk. I've never had anybody say that to me, or even touch on that. And most of it, it's one of the real wins that we've had over the last 3 years, is that the help desk knows their parameters and are very good at deciding what it'll be.
Do you limit the number of devices someone can use or be connected to the network simultaneously under one?
Not that I'm aware of. And I'd have to say that probably none, because some of the work that I work with the faculties a lot, and it would be not unusual for me to go in and log on 10 times in a computer lab. And I've never run into a barrier there, so I guess the answer is, if there is a barrier, it's very high.
Do you allow people to connect to their VDI using their own device?
The VDI machines are desktops that have been specially imaged for VDI, so it just won't work. The VDI is the virtual image is stored on a server back in our data center, so the device that they log into has got to be enabled to go and look and find it. So.
Can I just ask, where do you have the instructions on how to connect to your most common devices? If I'm a person that's ringing up the help desk and I can't help it, where do I get those instructions from? The services cabinet, email it to you or something?
No, right now you can I think you could probably log in, even though you're not a student at Sydney University, and see those instructions. So we've got the password all over the place. The sorts of questions that are around the help desk is that somebody will ring up and say, look, it says push this, and I'm running an old version of Windows, and so it's a different button. I'm not helping you with that. A bit of an afterthought that I tacked on the bottom there. We do, I've got some excellent deals with Microsoft. All of the universities have, by the way. This is not just the University of Sydney. And we provide 7 gigabytes of SkyDrive data storage. And so that's one of the helps for running your own BYOD. You can use that anytime. They also provide all of our student email. It's all outsourced. Okay, was there anything I wanted to add to what was on the slide? No. So let's talk about staff. Universities are interesting places for technology. I've been a staff member, as I said, for over 5 years. I've never ever had to go and say to someone, can I please have in the way of an extra device? The university makes sure that you have the right equipment to do your job, and it's fantastic like that. We talked about wireless, that's why I'm going through that. Windows, Apple and Linux devices. We've got engineering and the IT area, the faculty of IT. They want their Linux devices. Nothing works better than Linux. We support them. What we do, by the way, is that we've gone through a shared services arrangement where the faculties have actually brought their technology into the centre, and we just take their best Linux people and employ them in ICT. So they're getting the same service from the same people. Unrestricted free high-speed internet access, virtually unlimited disk storage. We've got researchers, medical researchers that are doing image scanning of the brain and those sorts of things. They not only want lots and lots and lots of disk space, but they want it to be secure. They want it to be shared by their colleagues in the university. They want it to be shared by their colleagues outside the university. And so we have to provide this virtually unlimited disk storage. Sometimes it's within the university's infrastructure, sometimes it's in the cloud. Depends on the particular need. High performance computing facilities. This list is about, why do I need to bring my own device when you can get this stuff anyway? Instructions on using devices, clear policies about using or abusing the facilities. I talked about EduCaroom. Heavily discounted equipment and software for personal use. I buy all of my equipment through the university because I can't get it cheaper anywhere else, including buying in the US. And if I ring up and say, my desktop at home that I just bought through the university that I own, I need help in setting up Windows on it, the the help desk will tell me to go away. Because they're not going to come to my home to help, and it's my advice. So, have we encouraged BYOD? I think the answer is yes and no. Oh, sorry, we'll answer the first question first. What devices are attached? We don't put any barriers, but of course, you've got to be reasonable about these things. We don't want network switches on there, we don't want DNS servers. And you might say, well, you know, why would anyone do that? It happened. We had a guy connect up a DNS server, all down the network in the Faculty of Education. Had to say to him, don't do that again. And other things. The staff. They were actually doing a research project, and they thought this would be a really clever way to present this information. Let's just plug it in here. Damn, ICT let us down again, the whole building stopped. Was there. Do we monitor traffic? We filter emails, we do all the usual things for email. We run Semantic Message Lab, so we've actually got a cloud-based checking of email. By the time it gets to us, it's been through the system. I get an email probably once every 2 weeks saying these are all the spam type emails that somebody tried to send you. Again, that's a pretty sophisticated process for a university. Do we encourage BYOD? I think the answer is yes and no. Nobody's going to say to you, you can't bring your own device in there, so that's encouraging you to use it. But we also provide so much in the way of facilities and functions and services and good stuff. So why do you need, as a staff member, to bring your own device in? And as a student, we're going to encourage you anytime you want.
But if you turn that statement round, then you're sort of discouraging BYOD. Why would you do that? Why would you want to be discouraging it?
Turning it round in the sense that if we're providing such good service, then
yeah.
I'm going to give you an example in a moment of what I call the BYOD gorilla, which will be part of answering your question. But what we've got to do is we're a public institution, and so we've got to assume that nobody can afford to bring their own device in, and so we've got to cater for the people who are at the university. If we say to them, you've got this mode of learning, we've got to give them the tools to do it. And we take that very, very seriously, making sure that everybody has got an equal opportunity to learn.
Do you ever get involved, you were talking about hacking a little while ago, on what looks to be a fairly open wireless network? You know, there's always chances of students against students and that sort of behaviour.
Yep.
Does the university in any way, even outside of the terms of service, get involved in that?
You mean a bullying prevention?
Yeah, it might be bullying, it might be denial of service, it might be actual hacking of other people's laptops, or even monitoring unencrypted traffic and scanning usernames and passwords.
If that happens, it's not such a high volume that I know about. Okay, I'm not saying, of course, bullying, of course, is at a different level at the university. People are a bit over it, and so they can just say, go away, don't say that about me. In terms of hacking each other's machines, getting somebody's uni key is the key. It's much, much easier for me to find out your uni key than I can do what I like on the system than it is to go and hack around the back. School of IT students, they've done some pretty clever things in hacking. You know what's the best thing about them? They come along and say, look what we've done. So they tell us about it. Yeah. So I haven't heard of those examples. I haven't heard of an example where somebody has maliciously and successfully got into somebody else's machine and caused a problem.
But what about stealing passwords? Because, I mean, it's going to be, at the point at which everyone's on the network, it's going to be unencrypted. So going to bank accounts, all that kind of thing.
I'm not aware of any examples that are coming out.
Do you allow the hosts on the wireless network to talk directly to one another, or only out through the free internet?
I suspect, I'm not a security person, but given what we went through as security, I strongly suspect that that's not allowed. and I'll find out the answer to the question for you. If you want to leave your contact details,
Sure.
because the guy who is our security expert, I can ask him the question, and he'll tell me exactly how it works.
And the current log-on process that they use for log into the logs.
Okay. Did I answer your question? Yes. We'll talk about the risks. I had to put some up there. I've gone through documentation on BYOD. Those seem to be the 4 common risks supporting many different devices. I had trouble working out what a different device is now. If you can use it to log on, you can get into use our wireless network. No control over what's on the device. Absolutely correct. We have no control over that. We do have background processes monitoring our devices. We've got 2,800 servers, virtualized servers in a data center. We're monitoring those. Security is a perennial problem. We've sort of talked about the issues with security, I think. We figure that they're a lower risk if they're a BYOD user because we know who they are. And planning would be an issue in an organisation that says, we've never had BYOD, we're going to go to BYOD tomorrow. I think infrastructure issues is a problem. In the university, we're catering for everybody having multiple devices on there right now anyway. And so planning for infrastructure, I think, is just a generic part of what we do every day. We're not going to have a 50% increase in devices next year. It doesn't work like that.
Do you have any concerns over data security at all? Of your data security? So say if you had a researcher who's got lots of sort of confidential information, if they put it on a BYOD, how can you protect them from going to another university?
We can't, is the answer.
So you don't worry so much about data security?
We care a lot about it, but if the researcher has got the ability to download that data, you can do it another way. Someone's going to leave the university to take a job somewhere else. They can download all their policies and take them away. You just can't stop people doing acting inappropriately if they have access to the network. We have had one example where a researcher did do exactly what you're suggesting, took it to another university. The other university contacted us and said, we don't think we should hack this, and let us know about it. So there's a sort of collegiate attitude in higher education is.
With BYOD, are you running into any browser compatibility issues with your university applications?
Only when Microsoft releases a new version of Internet Explorer. Yeah, we do all the time. One of the things that I haven't covered here is that we actually have Sydney University apps, and we try to make sure that they run on all browsers, but I know we have had some problems. I think the last one was actually Internet Explorer when they did a new release on it. But we do have lots of apps around. Well, let's talk about what I call BYOD for gorillas. In 2009, I went to Georgetown University to do some work on, would you believe, browsers at the time. And what they had done, just as I arrived there, is they had decided they were building no more computer labs. And the reason that they could do that is because their students could afford to bring their own devices. Private university, high fees, basically wealthy students or students on scholarships. So they could say, you must bring your own devices. What they also had the infrastructure in place, and it's a relatively small campus. Everywhere had wireless access, and it was super fast. Anywhere you went, it just had it. The only other thing that was interesting about that is that they had portals to download the software, because we were talking earlier about SPSS is a software product, statistical product. They could actually go to a portal at the university and download that onto their device. Now, obviously, you can't do that on an iPad. There are other products that are comparable, by the way, but if you had a designated device from a very long list, then you could use their portal to download software. And what I didn't check at the time was who actually paid for the software. but I suspect the university did, and then just put it through the fees to the student. So that's a university that has not only said BYOD is okay, but BYOD is the only way we're going to operate in the future, because they don't have to put in the infrastructure of computer labs, and they can just focus on making sure that they're delivering a good service across a range of end devices, but they're not buying those devices.
Question. So, the software that you're saying the university purchase and then give it to the people who's using BYOD. So what's the licensing agreement with this software company with the university, and they're passing to third party, which is the owner of the BYOD? How do they call that?
Okay. We've got agreements with most of the software vendors that are important to the university, that students can use the software. And Microsoft would be an example of that. I can get a copy of Windows, copy of Microsoft Office, I can take it home, and I can load it on my machine at home because I am an employee of the university, and I have an agreement that I've got to delete it if I cease to be an employee. The same thing applies for students who are studying for units of study. They're allowed to use a wide range of software. Of course, there are some exceptions, and what we do is license that software, meter the software on for usage in labs. We can't let students have every single piece of software if it breaches a license agreement. Most of it's covered though. I have 10 minutes to go.
Last questions.
Comments or questions?
Sure, we'll just start with that.
Now, I said that wouldn't take half an hour, but it's taken about 3/4 of an hour, so sorry about that. Anybody have anything more that you want to?
Yeah. Do you limit the number of devices that people can connect to the network? So people don't share their passwords or something like that? End up with 50 devices?
Somebody else asked a similar sort of question, and I could log on to 10 different machines in the computer lab using one Unikey, and so if there is a limit, I don't know what it is. That's very high.
Yeah. So I think the main corporate problem with BYOD is you bring in your own device and you don't know what the person's got on that device, and so you create backdoors and things. The whole discussions around wiping the devices remotely, all of that sort of stuff. So I guess you just deal with that by saying, effectively, you've got a DMZ wired network that has got nothing critical on it that anybody could really hack into. So in your lab, in your university, it would be just wireless. Presumably you've got a different wireless network that is the other side of that firewall. So if you just want to carry your laptop around with you, that is a university device.
The only way that you can use any of the wireless network is to log on using the Unikey. So it doesn't matter where you are in the university, you still have to use a Unikey.
But there are presumably then some things that you can only do through the wire.
VDI is the one that is clearly one that you can only is only available on the wired network, and there's no reason from a network viewpoint why we couldn't make that work on wireless as well, apart from the fact that loading big slugs of data.
So you really are exposing some critical systems to BYOD.
Yes, that's right. And I suppose how big is the problem that it's caused?
Yeah.
Not big enough that it's come to attention. When I was doing my research, and I promise this is the last thing I've got to say, unless there are more questions, I found an article that was written on the 6th of March 2014. It's on the ABC's website, and it was about BYOD in 2014. And it's a one-page article, but the bit that I've highlighted, there's no argument that the battle between bring your own device and company-bought devices is being won. It's BYOD that is the clear victor, especially when it comes to mobility. In fact, the respected research firm Gartner, some people might question that, estimate that 70% of mobile professionals will use their own devices within the next 4 years. The only thing that surprises me about that is that it's only 70% and it's as long as 4 years. But that's, fresh off the press.
Any more questions for Tom?
Sorry, quick ones.
Just to confirm this, if a staff member connects to BYOD wireless network, they have access to everything that they would if they logged on to their university provided system?
Yes, while they're on campus.
While they're on campus.
If they're off campus and log on, there are certain parts of our system that have to be VPN, and we're trying to cut those, and we're reducing them quite dramatically. But while they're on campus, just like they've been on the desktop. And I don't know how it distinguishes when you're on or off campus.
Have you noticed any surge in power usage, or do you think that the increasing efficiency of devices would sort of balance that out? Because if you're getting 4 devices each and getting charged.
The best way I can answer the question is to be the Sydney Business School. They told us that they don't need to be part of shared services because the money they save is they don't need the money. We spend $1.7 billion operating the university. The cost of electricity would be a very, very small part of that. And I'm not, therefore, I can't answer that question. I think it would be something that, yes, somebody will know the answer to it, but we've got 80,000 connected devices each day. A very large chunk of those are using university electricity right now, and a portion of them would have been plugged into a wall in the faculty to get them charged up during the day. We just don't measure that.
You should see what happens to the power grid when the air goes to on their wind tunnel.
Yes, that's right.
A quick one. You mentioned 15,000 calls to your help desk every month, was it?
Every month.
Yeah. Do you expect BYOD to impact those call volumes in any way?
Because we've got a line in the sand about what will help with, and no is the answer. The help desk operators, I sound like I'm singing their praises all the time. What happened was we got a new manager in there a couple of years ago, and the whole thing just works. And so people who ring up with a question of legitimately about their device, not about university processes to connect it, won't get through. I'll just say, sorry, we'll know. If the Vice Chancellor rings up, in theory, I want somebody to come and work on my laptop at home, you'll get a no.
In theory.
In theory.
Have you seen any variance in, because I'm still taking the call from actually short, still a call to answer it. Have you seen a sharp increase?
I can tell you that the number of help desk calls have gone from 12,000 to 15,000 over the last 3 years. But a large part of that is because I mentioned about shared services. Shared services is taking the technology out of the faculty and moving it to the centre. And so we've also had that process underway for the last 4 years. And so I can't tell you whether the 25% increase in calls is in any way related to BYOD or whether it's all related to those faculties now being part of the core technology. So that yes, there's been increases, but I don't know the differentiation.
Okay, if there's any more questions, we might actually just leave it to the panel to all discuss. And I'd like to very much thank Philip for presenting.